Thanks everybody for tuning in to the second Transformers podcast. I'm Matt Neal, partner over at Tessiant, and I'm joined today by co-host Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Draper. I am a senior consultant at Tessiant.
And we're both joined today by Alistair McGeorge, former executive chair at New Look, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and your other plaudits. Do you want to give us an intro?
Oh, well, I've run a number of retail companies, but I currently I'm out the firing line now, so I just chair a number of businesses which are generally attached to retail. And most importantly of all, I chair the Retail Trust, which is the retail industry's charity, and actually the most fun job that I do.
We were talking about that a little bit earlier, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well a little bit later today. I think today what we wanted to talk about really, so the point of Transformers as a podcast is talking about looking at the stories behind big changes within some of the nation's most interesting and well-known businesses, and you can't really sort of have that discussion without sort of looking at a business like New Look, which has had a roller coaster ride over the years. And I think it's what we'd like to do today is talk about you actually worked for New Look twice in your career. If we kind of talk through that kind of story a little bit. So I think, 2011 was your first stint, and that was off the back of it going private as a business in 2004 with Apax and Permira. There was a aborted IPO at the time.
That was the year before I joined, yes.
Yeah. It was labelled at that point as a zombie company because of the debt it was holding, and it was competing with the rise of online businesses like ASOS, wasn't it? So how did you come to be involved in that?
I came to be involved because a guy called Martin Clark, who was on the board, who worked for Permira, knew me well. I just finished at Matalan. So he said, come and meet Tom Singh, who was the original founder. And the business needs quite a lot of first aid. So I met Tom. Very interesting guy, and Martin. I saw Martin afterwards, and he said, "How did that go?" I said, "I've got no idea." And he said, Tom thought it was great." I said, "Well, then somebody needs to tell his face, because that is exactly what Tom's like. You'll never guess." But listen, he's probably the best guy I've ever worked with. The product. I think the important thing to understand is, yes, it had failed as a float, inevitably. Probably because they wanted too much money. That's generally the reason. But the most important thing from a peak, I think they had a £250 million EBITDA at its peak. It started to collapse. So by the time I joined, it was probably about 170 and still falling. Sales were falling. We had a mountain of debt, which was largely a PIK note, which accrues, as you know, at an incredibly high rate. And at 130 million EBITDA, the business was owned by the PIK note holders. So it needed not just some fundamental change, it needed someone to stop it falling below 130 million. And there is only one answer to that, actually. You have to cut costs.
Yeah.
That is your only thing that you can do. I also remember during the interview, they thought they were just about to embark on they spent 20 million on an advertising campaign. And I remember saying in the interview, "Well, you're just about to waste your money." I said, because clearly the customers are rejecting the party to which you're inviting them to. So you'll spend 20 million and you'll bring some of them back to the shops, and all they'll do is reaffirm the view why they weren't coming back in the first place. You have to fix the business and then spend your money. So they did waste 20 million.
How do you go about fixing a business in that scenario?
So initially, you've got to save some money. And that does two things. One gets the debt holders off your back in the short term, but also, as I said, at 130 million, we were owned by somebody else. So we had a challenge that I said, we're going to save 100 million. I just looked through the cost. We're going to save 100 million. And everybody said, we can't save 100 million. And I said, well, whether we save 100 or 90 or 110 is neither here nor there. We're going to save a big number. So we've got to do some big things. So we had some plans to do some big things. And actually, in the end, we saved over 100 million, which everyone... And that's the issue with a lot of these businesses. They're used to doing what they're doing. But if you ask them to do something fundamentally quite different, and that's the difference between transformation and operational improvements. Because if we were going to operationally improve something, we'd probably all be happy with another 10 million, wouldn't we? Whereas if the ability is there to save 100 million, let's save 100 million. So all that does is buy you some time. The most important thing that drives businesses, in my opinion, is culture. You know, Tom Singh's bought and sold that business quite a number of times and done very well. And so he deserves to do well. But, you know, it tends to be more a command and control, yes, which isn't my style. So all the companies I've got involved with, we've done a project we call Leadership Message. So we get the whole senior management team, not just the top team, but the next layer down, and we take them through a process where we determine what do we need to be to win? Who are we? What do we stand for? What are the key things that we need to be good at and do differently? And in fact, I don't get involved very much in that process. And the reason for that is I probably know the answer I want anyway, but I don't want anyone to tell me it's my answer. So I consciously don't get involved. And actually the answer we got back is largely the answer I'm looking for, because it's blindingly obvious what we need to do, yes. But what it does is no one can ever say that it was my plan.
Have you ever got the wrong answer and you've had to look at it and go, where have you got that from?
Words.
Yeah.
So and then I've convinced some people maybe to change the odd word, yes. The reason New Look was different was largely because of the way Tom interpreted product. So he would always say I was first to be second. So he'd identify trends and then he would make them wearable at value prices. But he did it in a way that was wearable for everybody. So it wasn't racy fashion. So the New Look business might have 3 to 5% of racy fashion, but it isn't really what people bought, but it was in the store. We just didn't buy very much of it. You know, a lot of people assumed we were a young fashion business. The average age of our customer was 31.
Yeah.
So it's more about fashion attitude and shape than it was to do with age. And the product had lost its way. The business has always had a poor engine room. So its ability to merchandise well and manage options, blah, 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 was very poor. But that wasn't, you know, Tom's background was product and he was exceptional at it. As we said, the cost base, let's just call it a little flabby, because if you can save over 100 million, there's got to be a bit of flab around. Online was about 3% of sales, so it was really in its infancy. We did have some international, but the answer was if we can't fix our own business in the UK, then you haven't got any right to sell internationally. And the shops were very poor. So in reality, Bar saved some money. We gave Tom the task of let's get the product back. We had a project on merchandise, which was transformational in terms of what the amounts we were going to buy and how. So they would stock to space. We want to chase sales, not stock to space. And you want to put the minimum amount out there in the store and then work out where it's selling and chase it. And that's a huge change for an organisation. And people would go to me, we can't reduce the stock that much. I said, well, whether we can or we can't, we're going to learn and we're going to do it. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
That was my first experience really around transformation and what I find, why don't people want to do that? Because to me, if we're starting with the answer of what we need to look like and working backwards, and you can't transform anything if you don't start with an answer. If you start with a problem, you'll just improve. You might improve. You have to start with where am I, a destination. So, you know, I always say the reason for, if you want to get to Sydney or you want to get to London, they're fundamentally different because one needs a plane. So the mode of transport. So as long as you know where you want to get to,
right,
and then you join it up with where you are. Now you may have to make some compromise because we can't do A or B, yeah? But generally you don't build solutions that have problems in them. And it just frees people up. I find most people are scared. They don't want to take responsibility if it doesn't work. So my answer to all of that was, I want you to do A, B, and C because we believe it will give us D.
Yeah.
If you do A, B, and C, I will go, well done. If it fails, I will own the failure. It's my failure. If it's successful, you can have the success. It doesn't,
Yeah.
But long before, if A, B, and C isn't working, we'll have probably done something about it and come up with D, E, and F, yes? Yeah. And, people say to me, when I joined you, people said it wasn't fixable, yes? And I never look at it like that. We had an answer. And the hard bit is not knowing what to do. I know lots of businesses that went down, they knew what to do. The question is, how do you get people to do it? So if you take away the fear of failure,
yeah,
and then we find out what excuses you may have, because everybody has excuses, yeah? So if you have no fear of failure and suddenly I remove your excuses, then the chances of you performing have just gone up exponentially. Why wouldn't they? And then if you don't want to perform, or quite frankly, the decision needs to be that we need someone else, if that makes sense. So you free people up. And they had a go. And then they surprised themselves with what they did. And I found that there's only probably 2 or 3 things. So we needed to transform our stores. And, I remember asking Tom, I said, pick a store. And he said, right, High Wycombe. And I said, why High Wycombe? He said, because everybody's there, yes? It's the home of River Island, yeah? He said, that's as competitive as it gets. I said, fine. So I made him come and open it. And we were double digit up. Because they never presented the product properly. They had great product. And even he was a little gobsmacked. And it's like, the same goes online. People just throw more and more options at it, yeah? Well, actually, that makes it harder for you to choose. And, I'm a great believer you make it hard for customers at their peril. So, in the end, we got the product right, the engine room right, the place of business right, the culture changed. People enjoyed coming to work and having a go. That ended up translating into online, which then grew from 3% to 10%. The next layer took it to 25%. But, therein you've got a business. We fell to 135 million. We never got to 130. And then it went back into the 200s.
And at what point do you feel, when you've done all of that work with the leadership team, when you've done all of that work with all of the other people that you've been involved with throughout that process, at what point do you think, right, okay, I'm confident that they've got enough skills, that they're in a good enough place that you can leave? Or do you, how do you make the decision to hand it back over to the leaders that they've got there without you guiding them and without you kind of taking the element of them being scared away?
So once we've taken the fear of failure away and everybody's clear, I never go in, but I just get out of the way. I know the small amount of things that I'm good at. And I know I'm 100% reliable to do them, if that makes sense. So by definition, the success is not about me, is it? It has to be about what I can get out of everybody else. So a number of people in quite a number of jobs I've had have worked for me a few times because I know many of the problems, the elements of transformation are the same. And I know they will have a go, yes? Most people want to follow, they don't want to lead, and I understand that. That's absolutely fine. But you only need a small number of people to do those things that need transformation. The rest are about improvement plans, and there are no ginormous improvements. It's a whole series of small improvements. But we had to transform in 3 or 4 areas, and one of them is always culture.
Yeah.
Because you can't be transformational if you haven't got a culture that allows you to be transformational. And if it's a culture of fear, you'll not transform anything.
There's another interesting dynamic with New Look at the time, though, wasn't there? Because there was originally a head office in Weymouth, and then a London office got opened, and then a lot of jobs got transitioned from there to there, and there was almost a sort of friction between the 2 offices. As I felt, I did a bit of work at the time around New Look, and I remember there being that sort of friction. How did you cope with that?
Well, that happened before my arrival, but that friction. So what they found was we lost a lot of skill People didn't want to move. Listen, it was the right decision. Running a warehouse out of a place that has one road in and one road out is probably not. It's on the south coast. It's probably not ideal. And the centre of talent for buying is probably in London. So, but inevitably you use talent. I mean, we ended up, we kept Weymouth, and it was largely IT, HR, finance was there. But we went out of our way to visit them because they're part of our team. If you park online for a second, the most important people in our company are the people who run our stores, because they're the people who meet customers. So our job at the centre is to make them great, not for us to be great. We'll be great if they're great, if that makes sense. So I make sure that the senior team visit every store. We try and visit every store at least twice a year. And we'll probably take the ones that are further away.
That focus on colleague is something that I absolutely love about retail. That most of the retailers that I've worked with at Christmas, that all the head office staff are out in the stores working with their store colleagues and never getting too far away from it. And the retailers that do get too far away from it, you do see them.
See, when I did that, no one had let me on a till. They said we'd never do any business. So my job was to just walk around the store and help customers and take stuff to their cars. And
you learn a lot as well about the stores then as well, about the colleagues that work in them, but also about the customers and potentially like the pain points of the customers. Even if it's just about one store and there's a couple of customers that mention the same thing, you can pick up on that and technically you could probably take it away and deal with it, which would mean the colleagues in the store would feel so much more confidence in you and the senior management and everything, It's good opportunity.
So we had a leadership structure in the store. So there are no role visits. There's no painting before people arrive.
Everything's
and our job is just to help these kids be great.
Yeah.
Now, if we need to make changes, we need to make changes. But, I wouldn't leave anywhere with more than 2 or 3 things on a piece of paper and what help they needed to do them. Yeah, I'm more interested in what problems they've got. Yeah, because we're generally the creator of all those problems. Yes. But that's not typically how retail used to be. It was very, very command and control, yes. And it's nice to see. Not everybody does, but it's nice to see when people come for the ride, and they take ownership of. I want them to treat the store like their own.
And the businesses have got that right. Their colleagues are so invested in the business and so in love with the business that it's a joy to see. Right. You talk about creating a cost conscious culture at New Look. How do you go about making, because it's not natural for a lot of fashion retailers, is it, to be cost conscious? I think you're about product, you're about trend, you're about experience a lot of the time, and not necessarily about pounds and shillings. Whereas you see that more in the supermarkets. I think. How do you sort of instill that culture?
You spend money as if it was yours. People don't generally waste their own money. I've found they waste other people's. So if you would spend it if it was your money, that's a good acid test. Everybody wants to fly, but would you pay to fly business class or whatever? Yeah, things like that. I always go, if people are getting off at the plane and they're going to work, then let's put them in a position that they can work going at the other end. Yeah, if they're going to arrive and have the weekend off, might make a different decision. But I've always spent money as if it was mine, and that's a good barometer. Yeah.
Talking about sort of culture, energy, motivation at that time, there's some quite famous stories of you of fruit throwing around the office. What's that?
We used to test people's catch. Yeah.
What was that about?
There are a few people who've been hit by we used to throw oranges and things around the place.
A rogue orange.
just to check you were being alert. Yeah. We just used to have a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people were only late for meetings once. Because if you wanted to be asked why you had the permission to waste the time of 10 other people, you didn't do it more than once. Listen, sometimes people are late and they have a very good reason. But generally, I expect people to be there on time,
Yeah.
And do what the other rule was, how many people come to you, they were due to give you something on a Friday and they come to you on Monday and say I was late, yes? And I go, well, funnily enough, I knew that on Friday. But you should have come to me on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And therein, that gives someone the opportunity to make a different decision, doesn't it? Right, you need some more help and support because someone's waiting on that. Don't come on Monday. We just had some rules that worked. But their rules, I come up in an era, those were always rules, yes? And there used to be far more serious consequences if you broke them in my day, yeah? I just think it's just being respectful and decent to people, yeah. And just like we were tried to be respectful and decent to all the people who ran our stores.
Yeah.
Do you think that's declined over time? Have you seen a change in attitudes in the way people work?
I worry today about working in a store environment, when our own government doesn't even protect you from, people can come in and thieve and not even get prosecuted.
Yeah.
The penalties for abusing people. I mean, we talk about, I run chair the retail trust, so I see all the stats around, and it's not very good reading, really.
Really.
And, let's just say working in a store cannot be anything like as much fun as it used to be. But there again, I think sometimes we bring that on ourselves. Retail, go back 40 years and walk down Oxford Street, okay? If you didn't have the names above the door and I walked in, I could tell you where I was. And then latterly, they started all looking like each other, yes? Apart from a few. Customer service has been squeezed, yes, blah, blah, blah. In my experience, women buying fashion is supposed to be an enjoyable experience, yes? I think some still do it very well, yes? But many, took the fun out of it. I'm not surprised they went somewhere else, yes? It's all down to the pound. You can always save money, by the way.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's quite foolish, yes?
The other thing is, I think staff numbers declined in places, and that's sometimes that's a you talk to people in the coffee place, and they're really struggling to hire people into those. So less staff makes it less safe as well. You're less likely to chase somebody down the street if
now to recruit. It's very hard.
Yeah.
The wages aren't great, and the environment, it's just not what it used to be. And that, can they express themselves? That era at New Look was fun. People enjoyed their jobs, yeah? We laughed, we joked. I suspect if you ask most of the people, they were quite surprised by the end result. Was I surprised? Not in the least. If you ask me about all the jobs, I'm disappointed by the result. Because I think if I knew what I knew now then, we'd have done twice as well, if that makes sense, because I'd have pushed harder.
Yeah.
Now, most other people would go, New Look was probably worth minus 400 million and got sold for nearly $1 billion, yes? One level, that's a good result, but, I just don't look at things that way, yeah? I'm interested in changing stuff. So the day of business is more about how we go faster, yes, rather than how we go differently. I'm not interested any longer here. If that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. My adage, if it ain't broke, break it. Because the art of putting it back together again might just lead you to do it differently.
It's like the old days, the Ford quote, isn't it? About if you'd asked 90% of people, you'd have ended up with a faster horse rather than a car. So
absolutely.
Oh yeah.
But remember, most people don't want to take that level of that responsibility for it. That's the bit I enjoy the most. So it never worried me. And also, if you think about all the jobs I did were all theoretically turnarounds that most people would have said couldn't be fixed. So the reality is, what have I got to fear? I never looked at it like that. I said, well, I can't lose, can I? In my world, I had no fear of failure, if that makes sense, yeah? And then your ability to make decisions and do stuff. Whereas if I went in with the fear of failure, I would probably go more slowly, more ponderously, blah, blah, blah. It just suits my personality.
By May 2013, EBITDA's up 25% at that point, and you bring in Anders Christiansen. At what point do you exit? Because you exit shortly after that.
I exited the following May.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to go and do something in Australia. Anders, we didn't appoint him CEO for a year, so I stayed as exec chair. He did some good stuff. And once he was appointed CEO, I stayed for 6 months as non-exec chair, and then it's time for me to go and do something different.
Yeah.
Most of these cycles are 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
If you can't transform something in 3 or 4 years, then quite frankly, you're not the right person to do it, if that makes sense.
It went quite well for a couple of years for Anders, didn't it? And then 2017, the same sorts of problems start to happen again. Was it different problems?
Listen, I wasn't around, so let's just say I think the business made some poor decisions. But I think when I got back and met and knew it, because the business had been sold, I knew the owner. He's a lovely fella. The debt was 1.4 billion. EBITDA was -10.
-8 like for like.
It was double.
23 million loss.
It was.
Who called you about that one then?
That is a different. What I would have said if someone had asked me to come in 6-9 months earlier.
Yeah.
It might have been a different story. The thing was, we'd alienated our best customers. There's no point going into why it happened. It's obvious something had happened. The sales were falling off a cliff. You do that at your peril, don't you?
So why had that happened? At that point, have we got a different culture happening within the business?
Probably, almost certainly. And there have been some changes made in terms of the product, the styling of the product. Anders wanted to take the business slightly a different way, which is absolutely fine. But it seemed to end up being at the expense of some of our customers rather than as well as.
Right.
Rightly or wrongly. So when I arrived, we're now in a financial play. We climbed the debt mountain last time. We refinanced it. We refinanced it twice, yes. I said we can keep this business afloat, providing the debt holders realise that they've lost their money and they want to buy into a new plan. And what's interesting is, people would go, well, that's just it. Well, but actually, that's not very hard to do. So in the sense that, you've got the banks are in for, say, 100 million. Well, they're not going to give you anything because they're almost guaranteed to get their money out if the business went down. The debt holders, I remember meeting them all and someone saying, we can't afford to lose our money. And I said, no, you've got this wrong. You've already lost it. The question is whether you haven't lost it. The question whether the thing is to put the business down, in which case we'll sell the brand and some of the assets, or whether you think you'd get more money by investing in our plan. And here's a plan for you. And most of them chose to put some more money in. I think we put about 160 million back in. And wrote off a lot of the debt. So overnight, the balance sheet had little leverage on it. The banks were okay. We got the banks to extend. And New Look still exists today, yeah. Listen, I'm not really aware of how well but it still exists. Whereas, with that level of leverage, and it wasn't, it couldn't afford to pay its bills. Yeah, we did a CVA and blah, 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 but those are all pretty normal things.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy the second time as much because I was doing other stuff.
Yeah.
So I said to them, I've only got a couple of days a week. So I spent my time really on the financial side of it, yes. We saved a lot. We took another 100 million out of the costs. But the bit I enjoyed was going out to the stores and working with the people in stores. I didn't have time to do that. And therefore the job, whilst on one level I'm delighted it still exists, and then, Tom the second time wasn't full-time.
Didn't have the same energy around it.
Well,
or different, focused in a different place.
It's a problem that requires full-time attention, yes.
Yeah.
No, I didn't expect him to be. And whereas the first time he was amazing, totally committed. But he had other things to do. Yes, there were some other people, but none of them were Tom. The answer generally to all these companies is to go back to your heritage.
Yeah.
What do you stand for? What are you known for? Start there again, yes. Now you can build off that.
Culture is again. It's going back to culture, isn't it? Because you've got I've forgotten the guy's name. He's that American guy who talks about sort of culture in businesses, and his theory is all about you want to build a business where you could take everybody out of the business and put a whole new set of people in, and it would still do the same thing because it's in its DNA that it behaves in a certain way.
I mean, I was lucky to go and study a long time ago in America, and if you go look at all the businesses that have been doing double-digit returns for a long time, no one can actually remember who actually ran them. Yes. So senior people within those organisations change, but they keep doing what they're doing, if that makes sense. Whereas there are lots of very well-known businesses that have been run by very big household names, that come and go, and the performance of those businesses seems to vary. So let's be clear: a command and control can work, but it only works if the commander knows what to do. The day the world's changed and maybe the commander doesn't know what to do, then it's not going to work.
And you can't keep bringing the founder back out of retirement every time the wheels come off, right? You've got
Tom's skill base was A and B. My skill base was C and D, and they happen to marry each other. Okay. I'm not gonna. I don't have any online skills particularly, but I just go back to first principles. We're still trying to sell stuff. It's still got to be good stuff at good prices, and we've got to give you an experience, albeit an online experience, that you enjoy doing, and it's easy to shop. The easier to shop, the better. And people lose sight of those things. By the way, that was the same 2,000 years ago. Yes. I always think if we can break everything down to the lowest common denominator, that's the easiest way to get stuff done. Yes, because you can't break it down any further. If you add complexity, sure as hell, complexity is going to cost me money. It's going to make it harder to do, and I'm going to make less money. People make a lot of money selling a lot of a little, not selling a little of a lot.
It's an interesting point around the online situation, because New Look decided to enter that market, whereas Primark didn't, because it's very difficult to make money at a low price point online, isn't it?
Well, that's an interesting one. So New Look, the most profitable part of the business when I left was the online bit. I know that might surprise you, because we charge for delivery. So if you charge for delivery, and it generally covers cost of pick, pack and delivery, then by definition every bit of the margin falls to the bottom. So it was incredibly profitable. But then to increase sales, blah blah blah, people start giving it away for free. I remember we did a thing called online specials, they were called. Every one of them lost us money.
What were online specials?
They were just things in different colours, different styles. Everyone lost us money.
Were they the ones that were focused on free delivery, or they?
Yeah, they were all.
They
gave free delivery. But even at the grocery, there were products we shouldn't be selling.
No.
Everyone was more interested in more options rather than selling more of what we've got. I'm more interested in selling the most of what we got, as well as adding. So there's a right level of choice, if that makes sense. There are a few get it right. I'm a great admirer of Next as a business, but its engine room is unbelievable. The chances of it being in stock are incredibly high. Fantastic.
But they've
got a great supply chain.
Their marketplace was custom built, though, wasn't it? So that type of thing means that it's.
I agree, but they've always been fantastic at merchandising, and at the end of the day, if you can be in stock of the things that people want to buy, you're going to make a lot of money. And the chances of them being in stock are incredibly high. There's a lot of online businesses. They were valued on sales, so why wouldn't you just keep adding more options? Didn't make any money. They're now having to be valued on profit as well as sales, but there's far too much complexity in them. They don't have the relative merchandising skills. Those are skills that just don't seem to be around the way they were before. But that's really where you make your money.
Do you think those skills aren't around because systems are doing more of it for people now?
No, because I still think they're doing it very poorly.
Do you think it's just lost because things have changed and the people that are working in the stores and the knowledge that's been held within the stores and the leadership, it's kind of lost as things change in these stores because
it's
not on the ground.
It's like buyers.
Yeah.
No, they're not buyers, they're selectors. Don't know how a garment's made anymore already, what the costs associated with it. Listen, it's not my bag, it's not that I ever knew, but Tom did.
Really?
So, the power is now with all the suppliers, believe it or not. They'll sit there and go, what do you want to sell it for? And you'll go, you should never answer that question, by the way, but you'll go £10 and you'll go, okay, I'll sell it you for £5. Yeah, that's the right ratio, yeah. And the fact that you could have bought it for £2.20 if you knew what it was cost, but you don't. And I think the level of those skills has diminished enormously. Businesses can't transform themselves without some level of different thinking, can they?
And it's about helping the teams to get to that different thinking. Right?
But I still come back to, I still know many businesses who knew what to do, but they couldn't get it done. So how do you get people to do stuff differently? That's the hard bit, because retail is quite simple, really, at the end of the day, if you break it down.
Yeah.
And get people to do stuff they didn't know they could do. Or inherently wouldn't take the risk to do,
It's that fear point, the bit that you said about removing the fear. I think that's so interesting, because genuinely, I think there's been so many times in so many things that I've been involved in where actually you can see people wanting to do something and they come up with all these great ideas, but then when you say, okay, well, let's go and do them, there's all this nervousness. But it's because there's this element of who's going to be held accountable at the end if this doesn't work. And actually taking that fear away at the beginning is, I think that's...
So I've always believed, that whoever's the leader owns.
Yeah.
As long as people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, the leader owns failure. I remember once, I used to work at Littlewoods, and we were the first people to offer 48-hour delivery. The purpose of 48-hour delivery was to provide certainty of when you would get your parcel. So order Tuesday, get it Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, blah, blah, blah. And then you got, right, and we thought it would lift sales by 8-9%, yeah? So we would have a performance that said, you who run the transport business and delivery business are going to deliver 98% of parcels within 48 hours. Okay, that's your performance measure. Not unreasonable. And I remember the person delivered 98 point something within 48 hours. So you theoretically go, well done, don't you? Now, he got blamed because the sales only went up 6% and a bit. Well, that's not his fault. It's got nothing to do with him. And then you got people go, oh, we've got some parcels. We decided we'll deliver them next day. And I'm going, no, you're missing the point. They're expecting it on Tuesday, not Monday.
Yeah.
The whole point is to be there when, because, so that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you think it's about certainty. What do you get frustrated about when we're all having to be at home for a parcel and it doesn't come, yeah?
Yeah.
We get very frustrated about it.
And that's, we don't have a retail conversation without talking about Amazon, right? That's what Amazon gets so absolutely right, is that it comes when you
Absolutely.
it's going to come. What they get wrong by your rationale is that they've got too many choice points and
Probably.
you end up browsing for 45 minutes to a load of
Well,
Chinese brands you've never heard of.
Well, and that's the reason I don't shop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to go in places I know will carry a reasonable range of what I want to buy. And I don't want to spend forever doing it, yeah? I don't really buy online,
It's confidence as well, I think, in the brands that you actually know. So when you know a store and you know the brand, you know the types of things that they're going to have, you want to maintain that confidence. And I guess as a shopper, if the moment that you lose that confidence because you get something that isn't what you expected, or it isn't the material or the fit or something, that moment you lose the confidence, then that's going to impact.
So go back 40 years.
Stores.
We all grew up with M&S, yeah?
Yeah.
Still our most favoured brand. Everybody knew their size at M&S. You didn't have to go in. You could say, just go and pick me up this, and this, I'm a size, whatever, yeah? That is perfection for remote retailing, yes. And then they started messing around with their sizes. We'll have single pleat trousers, double pleat trousers, no pleat trousers. And then you didn't know your size. Then all you do is the level of returns goes up.
Yeah.
But they had the ultimate size. And I mean, online wasn't as, well, it probably hadn't even been created then, but if they'd kept that going, because that's really what, it's the confidence, one, in the product, and two, it's going to fit you. I grew up in the home shopping industry. Let's be honest, the home shopping industry is the online industry, but with paper. Yeah, that's how it started. And by the way, they had the best merchandisers on the planet, because if they tried to, we call it spraying and praying. Yes, if you sprayed and prayed, you'd just end up with a load of stock. Yes. And you'd be out of a job. So the objective is to buy the minimum amount possible, work out what sells, and get back in it as quickly as possible. Yeah. Optimum store is to work out where somebody sells and then chase it. Whereas a lot of merchandising, or let's say we buy 20,000, they'll send them all out. Then I'll put my jobs done. Yeah, but you've probably put 25% of them in the wrong place, which would have sold somewhere else, yes? And now we're not going to collect them up and redistribute them, yeah?
Different kettle of fish, but we were talking to Doug Nesbitt last time from Argos, and he was talking about each page within the Argos catalogue. They knew what they would sell of that and what everything was worth to them as a business. Every time they put an extra page in, they knew what that would do. And I guess it's different with fashion, because you've got a limited lifespan on that stuff, whereas a spade is a spade, and you'll buy a spade, same spade, 2 years' time, it can sit in the warehouse for a year, whatever.
Absolutely.
Whereas you've got to turn your clothes over much quicker, haven't you?
The thing with Argos was, we called it immediacy, but we had to go to a store to do it, yes?
Yeah.
And it was always going to get hammered when people didn't have to go to a store. It wasn't the concept that was going to be challenged. It was the fact that they had 800-900 stores and they didn't need them, yes? People wanted it delivered to home, yes? Because, if I choose something and can have it delivered the following morning, that's a lot more immediate than having to get up and go to the Argos store to pick it up, yeah? The model itself is just the real estate cost. One they had to deal with, yes? That was always going to be the killer. They were kings of their time, weren't they? We had a business at Littlewoods that, was an Argos rip-off, but we just never did very well. We weren't very good at it.
There's a lot of stuff culturally these days about acts of service, isn't there? And like raising money for charity, putting yourself out for somebody else is an act of service, and that's very, very fulfilling, isn't it, I think?
All the companies that I've been involved with, we've always taken it seriously, raising money for charity.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way of bringing our stores together, our people together, and getting them behind something. And I mean, we got, I don't know, one of them, we got a team of 30 odd people to run the London Marathon at Matalan, and raised an enormous amount of money, actually. Anyone who can run a marathon can come work for me. And the reason I say that is, it doesn't matter how fit you are, it doesn't matter how much you train, there's always a point on that journey it's going to hurt. Now, if you haven't trained very much, it's going to hurt a lot earlier than it. And you have a choice at that point. You can go, I can give up. Now, if your body gives up, that's different, but it will hurt. And funnily enough, if you just keep going, your body eventually goes, you're not giving up, are you?
Yeah.
Right, well, okay, well, we'll let you off. You can keep going, and you get your second wind. And I want to work with people like that. I don't want to work with people who just fall over when it gets hard, because the only certainty is it's going to get hard at times, yeah? And actually, if it's not hard, it's not worth doing. So I want to work with people who know they can push through.
And I guess if you know what you want to be doing and you've set out in your mind the specific areas you need to be focusing on, and you've worked with people in the past and you know that they are good in those areas, why would you?
So most of the jobs that I've done all required cultural transformation.
Yeah.
They all required an engine room building.
Yeah.
They all required the stores totally redeveloped, and they all required some level online, etc., etc. By the way, we haven't mentioned the word marketing, because marketing, you get a bang for your buck when you fixed all that stuff, yes?
Yeah.
Otherwise, your marketing just becomes inefficient, yes? But yeah, it's, listen, I've worked with some great people. They've done what they were supposed to do. They deserve great credit. And I've been lucky enough to benefit from them.
Same.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for joining us today. It's been a really, really fascinating chat, and I really love the way you think about stuff. It really chimes with a lot of my own experience, so I'm loving that.
Yeah. I've learnt a lot, genuinely. I think it's been really, really, really interesting. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.